Morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting delicate ribbons of color across the stone floor. The church was hushed, wrapped in a reverent stillness that felt sacred. But beneath that quiet lay a tension, subtle but unmistakable, like a taut string one breath away from snapping. Lena Hartley sat motionless in her wheelchair, her white wedding gown cascading around her like an unspoken promise. A sheer veil danced lightly in the breeze from the just-closed cathedral doors. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence wasn't born of awe. It was the shock before a storm. In front of her stood Eric Sloan, the man she once believed would be her home. His expression was carved in stone, eyes glinting with something too cold to be sorrow. Then he spoke, and his words sliced through the hush with surgical precision. "I can't marry someone like her." The sentence fell like the toll of a funeral bell. No one laughed, no one gasped. Only whispers flared to life like dry kindling catching fire. All eyes turned toward Lena, some with pity, some with discomfort, some merely curious. She felt the weight of her dress, once meant to embody joy, turn heavy, suffocating, a shroud rather than a celebration. 6 months ago, Eric had slid a ring onto her finger and sworn he loved her, not in spite of her wheelchair, but with it. And now, before God and everyone they knew, he revoked that vow as easily as breathing. "You said it didn't matter," Lena whispered, her voice barely reaching her own ears. Eric shook his head slowly, face blank. "I thought I could handle it. But I can't spend my life with someone like you." No one stepped forward. No one called him back. And Lena, still in her chair, wrapped in white and watched by many, sat in the middle of a sanctuary full of people and had never felt more alone. Lena still sat frozen in her heavy white gown, eyes not yet dry, when a sudden noise sliced through the tense stillness. The grand wooden doors of the church creaked open with a sharp, deliberate groan, and every head turned in unison. A man stepped inside. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't clergy. He wore a black suit cut to precision, his tall frame casting long shadows against the light pouring in behind him. No one needed a second glance to recognize him. Damien Voss. The name alone could silence a room. Men changed sidewalks when they heard it. Mothers pulled their children closer. It was a name that lived in whispers, in unsolved disappearances, in power wrapped in silence. And now, he stood at the entrance of the church like it was his domain. No one dared speak. Even Eric went pale, his posture stiffening as Damien strode forward, unhurried and unbothered, heading directly for Lena. He didn't glance at the guests. He didn't acknowledge Eric, his eyes locked only on her. Lena looked up, stunned by a new kind of disbelief. Damien's gaze held no pity, no panic, only a cold certainty, as if he'd been planning this moment for a long, long time. Without a word, he bent down, one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her from the wheelchair as though she weighed nothing at all. Lena gasped, breath catching in her throat. "What are you doing? Put me down." Damien didn't answer. He turned, still carrying her, and walked out of the church as if no one else existed. And no one stopped him. Even Eric, the man who'd just discarded her, stood frozen in place. Like the nightmare had shifted scripts, and he was no longer cast in it. The black limousine glided silently over cobbled streets. Lena sat inside, still stunned, her once pristine wedding gown now wrinkled and heavy around her. Her hands gripped the leather seat, as if clinging to the last thread of reality. Damien sat beside her, wordless. He didn't look at her, offered no explanation. She didn't know if she was being kidnapped or rescued. As the car slipped past city limits, through hushed suburbs and into a dark stretch of forest road, dread began to rise in Lena's throat. No one spoke. The driver didn't check the mirror. The man in the front seat, a stranger named Gregor, rested one hand near the shape of a gun beneath his tailored coat. When the vehicle finally slowed before an imposing wrought iron gate, 2 armed guards approached and opened it without a signal. Lena turned toward the window and froze. A stone mansion emerged behind thick trees, Gothic arches, ivy-covered walls, manicured gardens sculpted to precision, beautiful in a way that felt sterile. But it wasn't the architecture that stole her breath. It was the walls, tall, thick, complete. "This isn't a home," she murmured. The car door opened. Damien stepped out first, then turned and reached for her. Once again, he lifted her effortlessly into his arms. This time, there was no audience, only wind and guards who kept their eyes respectfully averted. Lena didn't resist. She simply watched the heavy iron gate close behind them and thought, "I just crossed into a world I never chose." When they crossed the heavy wooden doors into a vast entrance hall, warm, luxurious, strangely quiet, a stern older woman appeared. "Prepare the east wing," Damien said calmly. "She's staying." Lena blinked. "I don't understand. Staying here? Why?" Damien turned, his eyes steely, his voice final. "Stay until I say it's safe." Then he walked away, leaving her alone in the house. The next morning, Lena awoke in a room 3 times larger than her old apartment. Soft morning light filtered through silk curtains, painting golden lines across a high ceiling etched with ornate molding. The space was warm, quiet, and unsettling in its perfection. A knock came. Then a woman entered carrying a breakfast tray. Her hair was silver, tightly coiled into a bun, her face unreadable, her voice calm, firm, and unmistakably in control. "I'm Sophia, the housekeeper. Mr. Voss instructed us to provide everything you need." She laid out clothes tailored flawlessly to Lena's size. Opening the closet, Lena stared, stunned. Dozens of outfits, shoes, accessories, all designed for someone in a wheelchair. Not a single piece out of place, not a single item unnecessary. It felt less like generosity and more like precision. "How does he know so much about me?" she asked aloud. Sophia didn't answer immediately. She simply smoothed the napkin on the tray and then replied in a measured tone. "He prepares for every possibility, and he notices what others don't." As Lena explored the mansion, unease bloomed in her chest. Smooth wooden floors with no steps, discreet handrails lining the halls, automatic doors, a compact elevator tucked beside the grand spiral staircase. None of it looked added. It had been built this way, from the start. She wasn't in a place hastily modified for her. She was in a place made with her in mind. Later, as she stared out a wide, arched window, watching guards circle the grounds, Sophia stood quietly behind her and said, "In all these years working for Mr. Voss, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you." Lena wandered into a quiet hallway of the mansion. Unlike the rest of the house, this corridor wasn't lined with fine art or polished mirrors. Here, simple wooden frames held old photographs, their edges dulled by time. One picture stopped her cold. A group of children stood in front of a grim-looking building. She knew that place, St. Bellamy's orphanage. Her eyes scanned the children, pausing as something tugged at her chest. A boy stood behind a little girl in a wheelchair. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, protectively, instinctively. The girl was her, there was no doubt. And the boy? B, she whispered. The name escaped her lips like a key unlocking a sealed door. Memories rushed in, half-formed images gaining clarity, stories told under blankets, arms lifting her when stairs became impossible. A shield when cruel words flew from other children's mouths. Then a voice behind her, low and familiar. "I thought you'd never remember." She turned slowly. Damien stood there, not cold or distant, but like a man stripped bare of armor. "I never forgot you," he said, eyes steady on hers. "Even when you forgot me." Lena's breath caught. All the years she thought she was alone, and yet someone had remembered. Someone named D, who now stood before her as Damien Voss. Lena sat by the window, the fading afternoon casting a pale golden hush across the garden beyond. Damien stood nearby, one shoulder leaning against a bookshelf, silent as if waiting for her to be ready. She looked up at him, suspicion and quiet yearning tangled in her eyes. "Why did you leave?" she asked. "No goodbye? No promise?" Damien met her gaze and nodded slowly. No evasion. "Do you remember the headmaster? Mr. Hadley?" The name made her blood run cold. "He took money from certain men," Damien said, "to sell off the forgotten children, the ones no one would miss. I found out, and one night I heard him say your name." Lena gripped the armrest tighter. "I confronted him. I begged him. Told him you couldn't be one of those names, that you needed to stay." He laughed and made me a deal. Damien paused, voice tight. "I left the next night, no goodbyes, in exchange for his word that you'd be safe, that no one would touch you. I left to save you, Lena, even if it meant stepping into a life you'd never recognize." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Lena turned her face away, tears slipping down her cheeks. For years, she'd hated him for disappearing without a word. His voice dropped lower, heavy with the weight of years. "I was there, in the dark, for 20 years, but I never forgot you, Lena. Do you remember the first apartment you were given? That was arranged by me. The scholarship and everything else in your life, I took care of it all, silently." Lena's tears fell freely. Everything she thought she had earned through struggle, someone had been fighting for her in silence. And yet, a part of her hurt too. "Why didn't you tell me? You let me think I was independent when all along you were pulling the strings." Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, he answered, "I chose the darkness so you wouldn't have to." After a long silence, Lena spoke. "You built an entire world around me, Damien, but you still won't let me walk through it." Her final words hung in the air, not angry, but cold with disappointment. Then Lena turned her chair and left the room, the wheels echoing in the silence. Damien remained by the fire, unmoving, and in his eyes there was nothing but shadow. Damien stood before the large surveillance screen in the security control room. City maps, satellite feeds, and blinking red signals danced across the glass. Nikolai, his most trusted lieutenant, entered, his face grim. "Pain has surfaced," he said. Damien turned, jaw set like stone. "Where?" "South Docks. He's bought out some of the old contacts." And he mentioned her. No name needed. Damien knew. Lena. Salvatore Cannet, once Damien's closest ally, had betrayed him in a brutal power grab, then vanished for years. Now, he was back, and worse, he'd found Damien's weakness. Lena wasn't just a memory. She was everything. "He knows," Damien muttered, voice low. Finally, he knows. Lena's stomach turned to ice. Suddenly, this wasn't just Damien's world. It was hers too. And now, she was the center of its crosshairs. He turned to Nikolai, tone sharp as steel. "Lock down the estate, total security, no one in or out. And get Lena to the safe room, now." Alarms rang out across the mansion like a warning bell from the underworld. Guards shifted positions, cameras rotated into motion. A storm was coming, and Damien knew, this time, the shadows alone wouldn't be enough to keep her safe. The safe room door sealed shut behind Lena with a heavy thud. The air inside was cool, soundproofed, like a velvet-lined cage. She turned to Nikolai. "Get me out of here." "Orders from the boss," he replied, unmoving. "Then take me to him." His silence said everything. Frustrated, Lena slammed her hand against the wall. This wasn't fear, it was fury. She wasn't the fragile girl in the wheelchair who needed shielding from the world anymore. When Damien finally entered, his expression was taut with worry, but his voice carried the same command. "You should stay here, Lena." "And do what? Wait for you to decide when I get to live or when I get to know the truth? I'm just trying to keep you safe." "Safety isn't living like a ghost," she snapped. "You say you've protected me for 20 years, but not once have you let me be part of protecting myself. I've been hidden long enough. I won't disappear this time." Damien clenched his fists, his voice lowering. "I can't let you be in danger." Lena met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "You don't get to decide how I survive. If Kane wants me, let him see me. But on our terms." His jaw tightened. "No, absolutely not. You are not bait. Have you forgotten?" She met his eyes. "I'm the reason he's coming. If I keep hiding, he wins." So we show him a false weakness, a controlled setup, a plan. Silence stretched between them. Damien looked at her, torn between instinct and truth. For the first time, he saw not the girl he'd sworn to protect, but the woman who demanded to stand beside him. Lena was no longer someone who needed to be protected from the world. Damien closed his eyes, and then slowly nodded. The plan was executed at night. Lena sat alone in the library, a room deliberately exposed on a fake security feed. Damien had installed knockout gas through vents hidden in the walls, waiting for the trap to be sprung. Though every step was under control, Lena's heart still pounded as the sound of stealthy footsteps echoed down the hall. Two of Kane's men pushed the door open. One of them grinned at the sight of Lena alone in her wheelchair, not knowing that was exactly where he would fall. She kept her gaze calm, her hand brushing the hidden trigger beneath the armrest. The gas hissed from small nozzles in the ceiling. The two men panicked, but it was too late. Within seconds, both collapsed to the floor. "Partial success," Nikolai reported through the earpiece. "Damien is tracking Kane." On the far side of the estate, Damien had found Kane. The confrontation was inevitable. No more words, just guns, knives, and two old devils settling a blood debt. Damien finally brought Kane down, a clean stab straight to the chest. But he didn't leave unscathed. Blood poured from the deep wound at his side as he stumbled back toward the estate. Lena rushed forward when she saw him. Damien slumped into a chair, cold sweat forming on his brow. For the first time, she truly saw the man behind the Mafia mask, not cold, not untouchable, but someone breaking from what he had carried for far too long. "You've always protected me," she whispered, wiping the blood around his wound. "Now it's my turn to protect you." Damien closed his eyes. His hand reached for hers, not as a commander, but as a man allowing himself for once to be vulnerable, at least to her. Damien's wound healed gradually each day, but what took longer to heal were the unspoken spaces, years filled with silence, where feelings had been buried so deep he no longer dared to call them by name. One sunny afternoon, as Lena was changing his bandages, in a room flooded with light, Damien gently held her hand. His voice was low, not trembling, but carried all the weight he had locked away for 20 years. "I've loved you since we were children." Not a desperate confession, not a line meant to impress, just the truth, plain and honest, finally released after years of silent protection. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she softly tightened her grip on his hand and whispered, "I've never forgotten what it felt like to be safe when you were near." In that moment, the thick walls between them, the secrets, the missed chances, the wounds left unhealed all fell away. Only two puzzle pieces remained, once separated, now finally reunited. 1 week later, the sky was strangely clear. Damien pushed Lena to the hill behind the mansion, where the whole city lay small beneath their feet, and the wind touched their skin like fate brushing past. He knelt beside her wheelchair, opened a small velvet box. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a man who had once ruled the underworld, but of the boy who used to stand behind her, so long ago. "This time, I'm not walking away. Marry me, Lena." Tears fell as she answered, smiling through them. "Yes." The wedding took place a month later. No church, no orchestra, no sympathetic stares. Just Lena and Damien, in the garden behind the mansion, beneath strings of lights that shimmered like stars. Lena wore a gown designed just for her, not to hide the wheelchair, but to blend with it, to celebrate it as part of who she was. Elegant and gentle, yet unshakably strong. The guests weren't from high society. They were the ones who had once pledged loyalty to Damien, now standing solemnly before Elena, recognizing her as the new guiding force. No one asked what would come next. They didn't need to, because everyone understood. These two were never searching for a perfect ending. They were searching for each other. And now, finally, they had been found.